Welcome, everybody, to Writer's World. I'm so excited to be here for our initial Keeping It Small for this kickoff circle. So, we are here tonight with guest speaker Kadesha Powell. Kadesha and I went to high school together, and then I lost contact and thought nothing of more of Kadesha until I found her on Facebook promoting her work as a writer. Prior, she was a school teacher in Washington, D.C. So we connected during the pandemic when she was promoting her book that she wrote about our hometown and what her experiences have been there. We'll talk a little bit more and you'll meet Kadesha later in the call. So to give a little bit of an introduction, my name is Audra White and I am an American and I live abroad in Delft, the Netherlands. I'm a writer, writing on Substack, promoting my brand there. I'm also a yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, and a teacher of basic meditation for a mainstream audience is the best way to wrap that up. I offer individual consultations and group lessons here locally in Delft and also offer some workshops abroad, more in the plans. So I wanted to give a quick introduction also to my Zoom jockey that's here tonight. Her name is Amanda. Do you want to say hi, Amanda, really quick?
Good afternoon or evening, depending on what continent you're on, but welcome everyone.
Hi, Amanda. And you live where?
I am in Joplin, Missouri.
Okay,
Right in
and
the middle
Joplin,
of the
Missouri.
USA.
Yes, exactly. It is in the middle of America. So this is really the heartland of America. And this is where Kadesha and Amanda and I have our hometown connection. So thanks, Amanda, for being here. Your role as a Zoom jockey, which is a role that you introduced me to, was to be the interactive note taker and engagement maker for the community and the crowd that are online and not really able to engage with how the host is presenting or what the host is saying. And it's also a way to help capture comments between the participants that are on the call so that there's still a little bit of a referee going on. Dump your links here, share your information here. This is where you can find me on the contacts and the socials. The Writers World Circle is all about connectivity and networking. Part of my long-term plans involve building a co-op to support a collective yoga community. So over here in Europe, that's important for me, but also to continue to build this virtual community abroad in a global network, and using my network doing that has proved to be powerful so far. So I'm really happy, Amanda, that you're taking over this role. And as an assistant, a former assistant, and you being a current assistant, it's amazing to have this kind of paid back to me, right? So thank you for that. Okay, so here's a moment to drop your links, and this is where you're going to share where we can find you, and you can talk about what projects you're working on. So at any point during tonight's call, you can drop information about yourself that you would like others to have. So this is a networking opportunity that goes on until the end of the call. All right, next up. We are here to talk to Kadesha. So let's just move on to the topic of my guest and hearing from somebody else. Kadesha, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to say that, first of all, I've not read your book. That's the other point of Writers World Circle, is that you don't have to read the book. We're here to support one another's art and work and projects and any sort of entrepreneurial activities that we are offering from a female perspective. So I have not read your book, and I'm very sorry for that. My sister has read your book because I emailed it to her or sent it to her in the mail, and then she gave it out to somebody else because she found it to be such a great book. So I can say that it was very well recommended. So I'm looking forward to receiving my signed autographed copy the next time I'm stateside. All right, first of all, tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you're living now, and about what you do.
Okay, well, first, thank you so much for having me on as a guest. I really appreciate that, and definitely connecting back with you during the pandemic and these last, couple of years. I kind of wish, like, man, we got to really get to know each other in high school. So my name is Kadesha Powell, and I grew up in Joplin, Missouri. And I actually moved there at the start of fourth grade, where my dad, who raised me, is technically my uncle. So neither biological parent raised me, and he took me and my sisters. So unfortunately, in the 70s, 80s, drugs, a lot of things happening in the DC community that kind of, broke up and separated the Black home, and things we're still seeing now. So going to Joplin, we had family there. So his sister's there, which meant my first cousins were there. So Delonte is the oldest. He's 2 years older. GB and I are 4 months apart. So it's almost like a twin. And we were in the same grade as well, and other plethora of others. I would say kind of like the early childhood was fun, because you could be outside until the street lights came on. We drank water out of the hose. It was kind of ideal. I think anything that me and my sister wanted to do, my dad was like, sure, go ahead. And when they didn't have coaches for our soccer team, he became the coach. We didn't have coaches for our softball team, he became the coach. So he always encouraged us into like, hey, explore whatever you want to do, and the biggest supporter. I would honestly say it wasn't until maybe 13 or 14 when I first heard the N word, like as far as a reference, as far as color. And that was unfortunately being invited, or like not invited. Well, being invited to a party, but then getting the invitation received because I was Black, and I think that's the first reference of color, because up until then, I can't say we didn't really see it, but we really didn't see it. We just played with neighborhood kids, played with people in our classes and whatnot. And so that was super kind of eye-opening to go, wow, what's happening here. So in my book, I wrote a book called Growing Up Joplin, and I chat about being one of a few Blacks in an all-white town, and kind of a little bit how it produces a different type of trauma, especially when it comes to identity. And I talk about kind of the pluses and minuses, so definitely here having the reference from there, where I definitely remember fourth grade being in remedial classes because we moved around so much. We were behind when we moved to Joplin, where my sister actually had to repeat the second grade, and then I had to do remedial math and reading. And I remember the teacher, and I was with about 3 or 4 other kids at the table, and I was stuttering through some words. She snatched the book and said, you will never be a strong reader. Colored kids don't learn like white children. But I'm sitting at a table with white kids, at this time. So something deep inside me is like, that summer, I was just like, didn't accept that. I pretty much had my dad drop me off the library. I was reading books so much, and I felt that books became my escape, of like, if I'm going through anything, I'm gonna put my nose in a book. And I'm a voracious reader ever since then. So the crazy part is this: between fourth and fifth grade, I read so much that my reading increased to like an eighth grade, ninth grade level in the fourth and fifth grade. Now they couldn't really believe it. I got tested 4 or 5 times that like what happened, and it was just on my own accord of like, she's gonna tell me I can't be a strong reader. I'm gonna be a strong reader. So I feel like the theme through that, I feel like kind of the person who I am is just kind of like, you don't tell me what to do and I'm going to do this type vibe of that. And I felt that it came out as a young person that, I've never accepted the status quo and things and the labels that they want to kind of put on being, a Black woman in America, especially in an environment. And then unfortunately, the stereotypes and things that go that even now, I'll be 48 in December, still have to go through microaggressions and stereotypes. That's super frustrating. And so I left Joplin in 2005 and moved to the DC area. So I started in Virginia, lived in DC, and now I'm in Maryland. So, but we call it the DMV. But I really like this area, love the area. I really moved here for my son, and love that he thrives. I love when he's in Kansas City. When he comes here, he has friends of every color, race, background. And I love that. And they come to see him from far and wide. And I think that that's being able to have an opportunity to know other backgrounds helps people be a little bit more well-rounded. So writing Joplin, after that, it actually became an Amazon #1 bestseller. And then I went home to Joplin and did like a little book tour. So that was nice. I had a lot of support. A lot of support inside the community. They came out to my meet and greet, my book signing, reached out to old high school who are the news anchors. So Howie and Bubba. Howie was on vacation, but Bubba had me on talking about it. So it was just a lot of love, support. And so kind of discount some of the online, trolls that have a lot of negative things to say, because you're hiding behind a computer. But the love that I received from friends that I've known since like fourth grade, my family, everything, that was just a beautiful moment to promote it. They read the book. I signed I've gotten great reviews, great organic reviews, and I still continue to get them, to this day. So that's kind of what led me, on the kind of the path to write my book, share the story, and just put it out there.
So As a writer of writing trauma, what has been your biggest learning in giving a tip for somebody who is also writing trauma, such as myself?
Yeah, so trauma and trauma writing. So the biggest tip I can tell you, and please, 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 adhere to this advice. Try your hardest not to write trauma at night, not to write it before you go to sleep, because you're going to go to bed with that in like your shanana, whatever, your heart, your spirit, your soul. And you can almost guarantee you're not going to have a good night's sleep. You can almost guarantee that your next day will be off because you didn't have a good night's sleep, and it's hard to kind of move forward. So I actually had a writing group and writing coach. So I took the advice, but unfortunately, one lady, she had went back to some trauma, and it set her back to where she didn't even finish the book. So what my coach told me was like, okay, prepare yourself for what you're going to write like in the morning, but have life in between the time you write. Go to work, do whatever you do, watch a rom-com, go get a massage, a pedi, something like that. But you need to have some life in between that. And then also, I would say have your psychiatrist or someone that you could talk to kind of get those things out, because it does become a little bit easier. And then writing provides that, catharticism to like get it out. And so, but, don't trauma write at night would be the best advice that I could give. And I believe you have some first-hand knowledge of like, yeah, she told me this, but I kind of did my own thing and wrote at night. And so you could explain, your what happened the next day.
Yeah, I mean, it's really different strokes for different folks. I do my best writing at night. I've always been a night owl. And even when I was a child, I started my first journal and when I was 13 years old, and it was in a spiral notebook. And I was trauma writing. And I did it before going to bed. It was how I slept. It was how I emptied my brain. So for me, I always write at night. If I don't do it on paper, then I do it on my phone. And I have to have pure solitude and autonomy. So like an hour before I go to bed, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to be touched. It's a hypersensitive thing. So I'm still processing it. Like my body is super processing it. But I think maybe the difference is that these last 3 years, while I've been giving my writing career a go, I've had the time during the day to do therapy. I've had mental health care resources literally thrown at me. I've been really blessed with a fortunate amount of time to heal myself and be in this recovery of a deep burnout, right? So for me, it's just any writing is trauma writing for me at the moment, because this is just such a cathartic process for me. Even if I'm writing something funny and humorous and it's a post on social media, it's still, I'm healing something. I'm only writing what heals me. And of course, that can be a selfish journey and then confuse readers, but what the fuck? Who cares? Just
Right,
makes me
right.
more interesting.
Exactly. And so the
So,
beautiful thing about writings is pretty much, you get to kind of find the process that works for you. But I think that's awesome that during the day you have the resources that you can take. You could take a nap in the middle of the day if you'd like to just reset. You could, as yoga and things, but some people have to still work, and the kids and this, and they're cramming all these things into one thing. And you and I know like burnout is real.
yeah.
And that it'll bubble up to the surface, and before you know it, we're erupting like Mount Vesuvius. And it wasn't the volcanic that killed the people, was the ashes that killed and leveled the town of Pompeii and everything. So yeah, but at least you're getting it out, and that's a great outlet to take what's up in here, get it out some way somehow.
Yeah. Forever inspired. Your story about Joplin and just knowing you and watching your journey for these last 3 years. So this, I had to think about like, yeah, so Kadesha just wrote a book about what it was like being Black in white Joplin. And immediately my mind went into my childhood stories. And I remember Browntown being a label that we
Yep.
used to define everything on Langston Hughes Boulevard.
Yep.
And and it was East Town,
East
right?
Town. It still is. It still is to this day. East Town.
For
Yep.
whatever reason, the Browntown label, I was aware of this as a child, that it was called
Hmm.
Browntown.
Yep.
And then one day I remember coming home, and in my dad's yard, there had been a statue of this little horse hitch figure where you would put your, it was a little butler man that was standing
Mhm.
out in front of your garden, and he was cement, he was made of cement, and he held a horse ring so you would hitch your horse to it. So it was a hitching post. but it was in the shape of a little man. And as a child, I grew up with this in my yard and didn't ever see anything except for a little man that was to hold the horse. And one day I came home and noticed that it was gone. And I'm like, Dad, where did the hitching post go? And he's like, well, we decided to get rid of it. Why? Well, because it's kind of not a really kind thing to have when you have guests over to your house. Kid me. What do you mean? Well, it was the color of his skin. It was a little red jockey and like red pants or white pants and a red jersey, and he was black. And it was a beautiful antique, right? It was gorgeous. And my parents just thought this is a gorgeous antique because our yard was filled of antiques and shit. And I didn't understand at the time what my parents were doing because they even said we had to take it away because he was black. And it's not nice. It's not kind to have that representation when we have people over to our house. And I was like, okay. And I, kid me, processed it and I didn't think of anything. But that was the first time when I was starting to be really aware of the biasness or the unconscious biasness, right? At a very young age and being sensitive to it. So when you and I were in high school, we like I didn't have a lot of the friends that were black because you guys were literally in another school. You were segregated in another building in our fucking school of 5,000 children. Like, how is that even possible? So the experiences and the journeys that you've shared have been inspiring for a lot of people, I think, because your voice is unique because you're kind of a whitey black girl.
Yeah. Definitely get that a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would 100% agree with that. And when you say how does this happen, it's very intentional. It's very intentional why Easttown is Browntown or Inward Town, based on the reference, because we have to look at the historical context when we even go back to slavery. Missouri, of course, was a slave state. The segregation was very strong and relegated to this tiny little area where people had. What a lot of people don't realize was there was a very public lynching in Joplin. It used to be about 25% black in 1909 or 29. Forgive me on the dates, but overnight, it went down to like there. So even now, it's very difficult. The population is still like 3% black. It was there when I was there growing up. It's still very much that same thing. And then when you're regulated to like a certain area, of course, this is where kind of all, the black folks are now. When I go home, people are more spread out. Fortunately, with the tornado leveling the town and, it didn't go over to Easttown, but the path that it took, people are now more spread out. Then I would say the same thing with school. Like, how do you guys get shuffled over to Franklin Tech? I think it was by design. Okay, we're going to test these kids to death. I'm super smart, but I'm not a good test taker. Like, I had testing anxiety, so I just never took them serious and I didn't do well. So because of that, it was like, okay, you're not going to be a college graduate. You're going over here to learn a trade. But inside the trade, it was almost like all the black kids, and I would say like the stoners, the kids get in trouble for smoking and drinking and skipping school. All of us was in this, course. Now I liked it. It was graphic design, graphic arts. We helped with the yearbook. It did give some creative endeavors, but again, hindsight's 2020. We never looked around and was like, hey, it's all the black kids. I'm like, oh, I'm in the class with all my homies and my friends, and we're having a grand old time. Minus, like I said, the super smart people that were still over there, like, my cousin GB, as I mentioned, he was hiding his smarts. Like, he in the top 10% of the class and getting A's and all his stuff, honor roll, this, that, and that, whatever. But he's trying to like dumb down his intelligence because it's not cool for him to be black and smart, which to me, I'm like, why? You're like, I couldn't get that because, it's just some craziness that we have inside of those realms.
Yeah, and preconceived notions that we have about people of different diversities and cultural backgrounds. I started noticing a difference. Of course, I left Joplin in 2000, and when I was visiting in 2008, 2007, 9, somewhere around there, I started noticing just the gentrification of the town, where the segregation between the really wealthy population that the hospitals bring in were significantly living a much higher lifestyle of entitlements and pleasures versus the city's lesser rich population, right? So the wealth, the division of wealth was so visual. And then you could also see the amount of migrants or homeless population that was moving into the city. And then it was also the amount of trash and loitering and the town started to feel very commercialized, and there
Yeah.
was no small town feeling anymore. Like, where did
Mhm.
small town America feeling go? You no longer have the main street as a safe location that you can bring your family on a Saturday morning and shop around the shops on Main Street. You no longer even have this community connection. And Joplin used to have that when I was growing up. So I started missing that. So when the tornado happened, what was that, 2011?
I believe 2011. Yep.
It was really a blessing in disguise. It was a horrible incident that killed, what,
Mhm.
161 people,
Yep.
but it was a blessing in disguise for the city's infrastructure and the
Right.
funding and the attention. I mean, Obama came to visit. It was such a big deal. So it really put Joplin on the map to be, okay, this is a city that has potential to change.
Mhm.
Um, honestly, it's the mindset of the people that
Mindset.
live
Yep.
there that need
Yep.
to evolve and adapt and change and move
Yeah.
into a more progressive mindset to where it's more sustainable for everybody's future.
Very true.
Problem is when we are coming from these small towns in the middle of America, we tend to be very close-minded in a bubble because
Yep.
those bubbles feel really safe and really
Mhm.
protective. And we want to keep our conserve our what's important to us and those that are important to us
Mhm.
close, but
Yep.
we
Very true.
forget about on a collective level what we can still
Mhm.
offer to
Right.
a wider population, even
Yeah.
from the comforts of our own home.
Right.
So for me, traveling abroad and living abroad has made me culturally sensitive to, well, various diversities. And I still have hope for our hometown. So we're not
Yeah.
here to bash it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, there's some great people there, and like I said, I actually was in DC and I was working in an office, and I saw the tornado on CNN at my work. So I'm super distraught and like, like I can't believe what I'm seeing. It was super surreal, and I couldn't reach my family, and friends. But after it, the aftermath of people just helping people, that's that small town feel that was, really beautiful to see on a national level. But like you said, like old mindsets are hard because I tell people if you could pass down recipes, how many times people got great grandma got this recipe and it had been in the family for 58 generations. You could pass down racism and bias and those type of ideas consciously or unconsciously, to the next generation. And unless people are willing to do the work to unpack their thought processes or question, hey, why did you say that, or why do you think that, or why are you referencing this, those conversations, it's hard to break those things. And I think that's going to be that difficult part. The other difficult part with small town is in that bubble, people still tend to stay within what's comfortable with them. So they're not going to be intentional to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go out and, not being like, I'm making black friends or Hispanic friends or whoever. But I believe I can't remember the studies and, don't quote me, but they were talking about in America, the whole America as a population, a lot of white America don't have any friends of color. So if you don't have any friends of color to see on a one-on-one, then what your reference point is television, which we know absorbs and hyper, whatever the stereotypes, and then you believe, oh, okay, that's black people or whatever. And for me, just even on the call, y'all know, like, I'm not in here like angry, but I get when I'm passionate about stuff. Why are you angry? Why are so I get that coming back to be like, am I displaying anger? But it's somebody else's bias of taking my passion, turning it into anger, or having the need to feel like they have to tone police me, to tell me, okay, you should have said it nicer, you should have said it this way. But I was just like, what did I say that was offensive? And so it's a whole circle that if it's like, people want to pause, but like I said, people get very defensive, and in people's defense, the walls go up and you can't break it. So it has to have people being able to be willing to have honest conversations, willing to like look at their own hearts and then say, okay, yeah, I have some bias, I have some racism, I have some. Now, how do I change this, or how can I be intentional when there aren't any people of color? That's what makes it very difficult to break some of these small town mindsets, even in the bigger cities as well.
So if you could summarize it in just a few words, what is the missing element that causes such a breakdown of communication and connection between people? What do you think the missing element is?
I would almost say almost compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
I would say compassion and empathy for people who are different than you, no matter, what your color is. If I can be compassionate and empathetic about what's happening with you, or again, travel to see other cultures and experience that, hey, there's not one way to live, then those open those, those doors. Now, I'm married to a Nigerian, and we're about 5 years in, 3 years married and everything. It's been interesting with my relationship with my spouse that, yeah, on the outside we have brown skin, but internally there's still some vast differences, and that both of us, work hard to confront the biases that we have, okay, the African biases versus African Americans, or Black Americans versus Africans, and these things, and figure out, well, how does this stuff stir up? Because there are people in Nigeria, before they come over here, they tell people don't socialize with Black Americans because all of them, they don't want to work, and they're on the corner, and they don't take care of the opportunities provided for them, and they don't do this, this, and this. They have a whole checklist of why not to, but I kind of flip it to say, well, kind of how arrogant could I be if I, as an American, moved to Nigeria and said, I'm not fooling with no Nigerians, but I only found American expats and was living my existence through that. So, it's just been some really, where it's not just racism, we all have bias. We all have it. We all have them in there. But when we have these conversations, and, intimate relationships with people where the vulnerability and the rawness can be there, that's what's going to change the world. I encourage people, get out. When I talk to people in Joplin, the furthest they're going is like Lake of the Ozarks. Maybe they kick up a Kansas City Chief game, but they're not really leaving the Midwest.
They got some slack. They go to Texas. They go to Mexico.
They do go to Texas, okay, yeah, they'll go. But hey,
but it's expensive.
The
cost of living is very cheap in the Midwest, but the incomes and the salaries are definitely not comparable to people on the other parts in the coast.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. But there's ways to go around it. I was a teacher, and I've been to over 25 countries, but I was intentional. I had a 10% of my salary go to a travel budget. So inside of a year, I could almost travel wherever I want to go inside the world. Like, I spent 3 weeks in Guatemala and was like, I'm gonna learn Spanish, but I was down there just goofing around in Guatemala. But I love the culture because I was doing one-on-one lessons, but I found the Spanish version of myself. So we got nothing done, because the minute I found out donuts and coffee, we was on our walk, and that's what we did every day. But people was like freaking out, like, oh my God, you're going to go. And this was like 4 years ago, 5 years, not a long time ago. Like, I'm a whole full like adult, and they're like, oh my God, it's gangs, you're gonna get kidnapped. I'm like, okay, I'll see you later, bye. But again, that goes back to me just breaking out and travel being a love for me, and I make it a priority. So I'm gonna find how I'm gonna get somewhere. I went to Switzerland and Ireland this summer, and people laugh at me because I was trying to find some Black Irish, like some Black people who are Irish. But it was beautiful inside of the history, where some of the older Irish people was like, well, listen, it was pretty much no diversity here. But in the 90s, we opened up immigration. There was some African immigrants, primarily Nigerians, that came. Now we're just seeing the first gen, because all the Black people I talked to was either other Black Americans, or they were coming to Nigeria, to Dublin, to study at Trinity College. So I'm like, I want to go back, because I'm going to find me. But that's just
find me a Black person.
I'm gonna find me a Black guy, because I have a story in my head. I have a rom-com, but yeah, so I love that. I love cultures, trying new things, taste new things. And that's what's broadened my own perspective. And then I pass that on to my son. I would start schlepping Izzy, and he's 27. He spent 6 months in the Dominican Republic at 13 to do a study abroad. It opened up his perspective as well. And it just depends. So yes, money and expect, but if you plan a year out, you can almost do anything you want to do if you're strategic about it.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, my DMs are filled of a lot of Americans asking about potential spots to live other than America. So we can't give up hope on America, but the revolution is here. We just have to accept that the Reformation is going to go gently and softly, and there won't be any casualties. So give me some information on what it is that you're working on. What's your current project?
Okay, so my current project is, my heart is screenplays and screen passion. When I left teaching in like 2021, I really have dedicated a lot of time in learning screenwriting. So I've written 2. And so I'm working on a screenplay now, where a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of people in the industry and just low key pitched out some stuff. So I'm kind of working on like a sci-fi, kind of like what if ET didn't land in Indiana, but he landed in like West Philadelphia, so I'm playing with that, like high concept. But my version of what I would think ET, would look like, if we were
Being
gonna have
raised
it
by a bunch of black homies in the ghetto.
today. Right, but not necessarily in the ghetto, but some black homies, but but it's they're in a foster care. So,
Okay.
home. So it's a bunch of different varieties and why these kids are here with different backgrounds and stuff. Because we want to break stereotypes too. Like I don't want to be the perpetrator of stereotypes because again, we just had an implicit bias when we think that West Philadelphia, oh, it's all ghetto. It's like, well, now there's some great spots there that's not quite gentrified and things. So I want to switch that perspective. If I say he's in Westville, I don't want you to automatically go there like, oh, there's some black homies in ghetto, because let's look at the demographics. Let's see it. I want to change that mindset. So that's what I'm working on now. And then I work as a book coach, and I help clients write their books. I specialize with memoir, and kind of devotionals and self-help because they kind of have the same similar flow.
Yeah.
So 2 clients I'm working with are in that realm. One's got a beautiful story about love at 60, like later in life, getting married, and so dealing with past childbearing years and things like that. So it's just a beautiful like love story. And then her husband, he lost his wife like 2 days before their 45th anniversary, and how they found each other is just like, I'm crying in their little manuscript as I'm kind of tearing up the manuscript as an editor, to make it stronger. But yeah, all things creative, love it. I do photos and videos on the side. And so that's me in a little bubble, a little energetic 4'11" and 3/4 little bubble. I'm a little shorty pie.
Yeah. It's amazing. I think we've spoken about this before, but our common themes are resiliency and transformation.
Yes.
Because you, like me, have a story that it's not embedded in trauma because you've had a lot of successes and abundance
Yeah.
and fortunate people that have crossed your path that have given you the rewards that you're reaping now. And I get that also, but you understand the power of transforming. A
Yes.
lot of people might feel hesitant to transform. I am a person who wakes up in the middle of the night and decides after having a wild dream that I want to be somebody else. And then the next day I work for it. So you also get that. It's like a burn. It's really
Yeah.
intuitively driven by an instinct that's like a calling to want to chase your dreams and want to be bold and courageous and do things that are just mind-blowingly outside of the norm. And I think that that's probably one of your strengths, that I can at least relate on. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you
And I
providing
just
that.
call it just being myself, just like, I've always been a little go-getter, and my focus is like, hey, if I can't get something or do something, I'm gonna find a way to do it. And so yeah, that kind of strengthened resiliency, and then I encourage people too as well. What do you want to do? Let me help you get a plan to get there. But a lot of people are just scared to take that first step, and it's not even because they're scared to step out, they're scared of what other people are going to think.
Yeah.
So the minute you can break yourself off to be like, well, to hell with what anybody else thinks, they're not paying my bills or whatever, that's so freeing in itself. Once people are free of allowing others to place limits on them, then you could break out. Because again, in Joplin, you're smart for a Black girl, you're funny for a Black girl. It always proceeds for a Black girl. It wasn't until I left Joplin and I moved here, and I never heard that from any colleagues or anything out here, to realize, okay, well, it's not me, as a Black girl, like I'm funny as a human being, like I'm cool as just myself. But like we said, these things that I had to leave Joplin to kind of see that, because I'm not 100% sure if I stayed there, what and where and whatnot. But I was never happy in Joplin. So I knew I was going to break out. I didn't know what way, but 2005, that opportunity came and I was like, bye, like kind of wrote out. And again, the town served its purpose for the catalyst of me being able to be transformative and transparent to share my story, because we all have a story. Nobody's story, even if you have an identical twin, nobody's story is the exact same. And that's why right now with social media, with so many mediums for people to tell their stories, the medium you have, that's leveling the playing field. It's leveling the playing field. So now we don't have just one place to get media where we know 97% of the media is controlled by 3% of the population. So they put what you want to hear. Now we could get on here. And that's why I'm a, fan of like some social media, it's not all, where people tell their own stories. Hey, I'm here. This is what's happening to me. This is what's happening now. And that's another little connector that, I'm glad we didn't have social media growing up, because you don't got nothing on me at all other than, hey, did you do this? No, I don't remember. I didn't do nothing. But now social media lives forever. Someone's going to screenshot and bring back your, what you said in 2002, but they don't allow people to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
That's that hard part about social media. Let people grow, evolve. We're going to make mistakes. It doesn't need to be magnified. Certain people don't need to be canceled for some of this stuff that people are getting canceled for. Now, certain people do need to be canceled, but for certain making human mistakes, that doesn't require that. Making big major mistakes, yeah, we can go there and do that. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So where are you most active on the socials? TikTok still?
Yeah, TikTok. I love TikTok because y'all know, like I can't say y'all know, but hopefully from the call, pretty bubbly. I can get on there and kiki, interact with people. I like the videos. I'm a visual, so I like to see the trends. Now kind of find myself on Book Talk because I'm still an avid reader and books. I like kind of seeing what's coming out. I'm on the social justice side, and then based on some of the stuff, I accidentally one time got on like the uber right conservative side and was like, oh my God, how'd I get here? Get me back over closer to the middle on this side. But growing up in Joplin is very uber conservative still now. I understand that side, but this side has changed drastically from when I was growing up to kind of what it looks like now. I mean, politics as a whole, I pay attention to it, but I'm not immersed into it. It's not my world, my identity, my badge, which is what we're kind of seeing, unfortunately, and then who would have thought we'd be living through a pandemic and some crazy stuff that we've seen in this less than 50 years of life, y'all.
I know, it's way crazy, fucked up shit that we're living
Yeah.
through right now, but it's great. It's a great time to be alive. What a
Yeah.
moment in history. Okay, we're gonna wrap things up. I actually want to hear from one guest. Oriana, would you mind sharing and speaking? You don't have to turn your camera on, but I want to actually ask you a question because we've recently just had a topic about unconscious bias. When I asked you as a Romanian what it felt like for me to hear, for you to hear me use the word gypsy to describe myself by, because I do it often in my writing. I've been told on social media in my writings that I've offended other people by calling myself a traveling gypsy and having a gypsy soul. So as a Romanian, what is your your factual information and your own biases around that topic?
Yeah, well, why we talked about that is because in Romania there is a larger minority of gypsies, Roma, which are called Roma now. Well, not now, but they really prefer to be called, referred to as Roma, because many of the Roma people feel that there's a negative connotation to the word gypsy. So it's probably like the N word in American English, right? That's how I can, maybe see how it works. I'm not a Roma myself, so I don't know how that feels. The thing is that it's the word gypsy, it's also used in a very romanticized way throughout Europe, not only in Romania, in Spain, Italy, having a nomadic lifestyle, not living according to the social rules and regulations. So there are two ways of looking at the word gypsy. At the same time, I do feel, again, I'm not Roma, so I can't speak on behalf of that part of the population. But what I do feel is that if there is a majority of people saying, for us, it's a hurtful term that you're using, it's for us people who are not of that part of society to listen to it. Exactly like Kadesha said, to empathize and try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. If someone tells you, it hurts me, who am I to say, no, it doesn't? That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think to follow up Kadesha's point where she said lacking empathy and compassion, yes, absolutely, first and foremost, but I also think it's a lack of knowledge, meaning
Exactly.
a result of ignorance, and it's also a lack of resources.
Yeah, we talked about that too. It's also about educating yourself. Okay, you don't know everything, nobody can know everything, but when you are in contact with people who are giving you very clear signals, it's your responsibility to educate yourself and find that knowledge that you're missing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we can all do, because we're ignorant all the times. I mean, I don't know, if I talk about a Colombian person, I just hardly know anything about Colombia. So if I have a lot of assumptions and somebody is telling me things, oh, it's not the way you see, then I'm just there to get educated as well.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah. Thanks for your feedback and input on that. Hi,
You're
Jess.
welcome.
Do you want to add anything?
Just saying hi, and I'm happy to be here. I'm also an American living in the Netherlands. I've been here 17 years. I live, what is it, like 40 minutes from Audra in a city near Rotterdam called Dordrecht. And I am a transformational coach and counselor and also a writer. And Kadesha, I do want to connect with you because I really, really want to get my memoir written. So I'm excited to hear your story. And I echo a lot of what the sentiments that have been shared here this evening. So thank you so much for sharing. I've learned a lot just in this 45 minutes. And yeah, it's good to self-reflect. I'm from upstate New York and grew up on a farm, and my family is very conservative. And, living with my mother was closer to, I'm from Syracuse. And so living closer to the city, I went to a larger high school with a lot of kids, from different ethnic backgrounds. And I remember one time I had a Black friend. He brought me, I think he was picking me up or bringing me home from youth group because we were very involved in the church at that time. And my grandparents did not know what to do. Like, oh my gosh, for the first time, there's a young Black man on our property. And I'm thinking, first and foremost, he's a human being. Like, you don't have to act any differently. Just be yourself. Let's be genuine and authentic with each other, So, and yeah, it's, I've learned so much over the years. I think,
everything up.
What's happening?
oh, what happened? Sorry about that. Am I still here?
Now I hear
Sorry.
you.
Just talking about, I believe it was you, Kadesha, who said, it's helped to broaden my whole perspective just by traveling and going to other cultures. I share that sentiment as well, just living and going out of where I've grown up my entire life, because it gives you a whole different perspective. And I think as Audra, you probably can share this as an American living in Europe, and looking back at our home country as well and being like, what the hell is happening, and like, but yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, I really have enjoyed the conversation. So thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to future meetings.
Future Writer World Circles. Yes, ladies, thank you so much for being here. So again, you can find me on Substack. Amanda has dropped those links. Thank you kindly, Zoom Jockey Amanda. And Kadesha, thank you for your time. I really can't thank you enough because you're also working with me on a personal level as well. I have so many flipping coaches, it's not even funny. Those people who have strong addictive personalities, which I am one of those people, but my addiction is really to self-help. And I found self-help books in my early 20s when I was struggling with an eating disorder. And I literally binged every single book that I could find at any vintage store. So I was reading books at the turn of the century. So this was late 90s, turn of the century. I was reading books of the 80s. This is Tony Robbins. This is Marianne Williamson. It was Janine Roth, Annie Lamont, all of these writers that had established themselves in the late 80s, early 90s were healing me in the 2000s. So I had that moment to alchemize the learnings from it and then take it away. But it's really been hard to not, to learn how to separate my relationship with how I heal myself. Because I'm a person that I would consider a 5-star vacation to go live in a rehabilitation center. That would be very calming for me, just to be plugging out for 30 days where I only had myself to be with and myself to focus on. And then there was a fun little group to interact with. Like that, it's hard. So when we do our efforts of healing, recovery, self-help work, we have to also take that in a moderation. Like Kadesha was saying, no trauma writing at night. For me, that works, but I couldn't trauma write, for instance, in the morning. My brain is way too sensitive and I can't think about really negative, heavy thoughts in the morning. So really, I don't even like to be talked to until about 11 o'clock. I just like to have my morning silence and quiet and solitude. So we all have our own little things, right? Okay, so that will take me into the next topic where I talk about how we live in our bodies when we do yoga. But for now, I want to thank everyone for being here. Feel free to drop, Jess and Oriana, you guys can also drop your information to share. And ladies, thank you. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Audra and Kadesha.
All right.
Yes.
Good
Yes,
night.
thank you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night. Thank you so much.